Now, how is the presidential race for 2016 shaping up? Recent surveys conducted by the SWS and Pulse Asia wows the shift of choices of our people. Although Senator Grace Polly's Vice President Jejomar Binay has been slipping in the rankings, the biggest gain was registered by former local government Secretary Mar Rojas. Davao City Mayor Rodrigo Duterte, despite he will not run, is also on fourth. With the latest survey, how will the race shape up until May of next year? And joining us tonight on NewsLife is Mr. Ramon Casiple, Executive Director of the Institute for Political and Electoral Reforms. Good evening, sir, and welcome to NewsLife.
Good evening.
Now, sir, given the results of the latest survey of the SWS and the Pulse Asia survey, now, how do you see the trend for the presidential race next year?
Well, it's pretty exciting with the top three who already said they would run, bunching up near the top. And Mayor Duterte, who has not said he will run, but most of the people, I think, don't believe it, is also on that list, the fourth, in fact.
Now, sir, the rise of Secretary Ross in the surveys plus the ratings of the president. Now, will this be valid to confirm that the president's endorsement has helped Secretary Mar Rojas' rise in the rankings?
Well, actually, I was surprised by, not by the rise, but how high the rise was. Because bump, that's when you confirm that you're running, and an endorsement, even by a popular president, does not usually cause a more than, let's say, 4 or 5%. But this is a 10% almost 100% increase. And given the events that happened to the administration the past 3 months, that is a pleasant surprise that he made it. In fact, he upstaged Vice President Binay by 1 point in the Pulse Asia survey. This is an interesting race that's shaping up.
What did you observe? You're saying that it's not natural of a bump that big.
Well, usually bump, let's take an example. When former President Cory Aquino died, that basically catapulted the president into becoming a viable candidate. That is a huge event. Slightly below that, of course, are events that would, make a popular figure run, and you may see a huge jump. The order of the rise of Secretary Rojas was on the order of 100 to 150% in the last 6 months. That's pretty huge by any standard.
Now, these surveys will be continuously conducted all throughout until before the elections. Now, how do you see it panning out? Now, it's nearing the time when the deadline for those who want to run will have to file. How do you see this panning out?
Well, the one thing that will be coming, of course, is the finalization of the list of the candidates. And that would immediately limit the choices of the voters. So the outcome of any survey after the filing candidacy would be quite different from that of the pre-filing period. And I think what would happen there is a very close contest. Of course, all have their own advantages and disadvantages, and all of this will come into play during that period, going into the campaign. And of course, the campaign itself will be the decisive one.
Now, seeing the rise in rankings of Secretary Mar Rojas, now, how do you think, what would it take for him to maintain this surge all throughout?
Well, if you're talking trending, I wouldn't be surprised at the rate he's going. He's going to be #1 the next time around. That will be a challenge to Vice President Binay and even to Senator Grace, the #1 running now. Of course, the key question will always be there. This is the question of, is there a real momentum? Meaning, this is already after the bump and the endorsement. If you need to maintain that momentum, you need to do something an event or whatever that can propel that can sustain that momentum.
Now, looking at Senator Grace Poe, she is now ahead in rankings. Now, how is the issue of her citizenship going to affect this? Or is it actually going to affect it at all?
I don't even think it's an issue. I mean, it's a very dangerous landmine there. The more you beat on the issue, there is the danger of her becoming an underdog. And if you're aware of the political culture in the country, the underdog always wins.
Now, so now looking at Vice President Jejomar Binay, his rankings has been slipping. Now, do you see this as an ongoing trend, or is there a way for him to actually rise up?
Well, actually, I'm not surprised. It's not actually slipping. It's within a range. I mean, it depends on what survey you're citing. But his ranking at around 20 to 30% would mean that if there are more candidates, then he would have an advantage, because it's turning out that his figures and the ratings are pretty constant, actually, not really going down.
Now, going to Congresswoman Leni Robredo, if she does decide to be the Secretary Mar Rojas, now how do you see this panning out? Is this going to be a tandem to beat?
Well, in the same way, I think that Senator Grace Poe has been perceived as the non-politician in the presidential race. Congresswoman Leni Robredo would also fulfill that role. And I wouldn't be surprised that her ratings, as people really got to know her, would suddenly shut up, particularly when there is resources behind it. So it's really an interesting race, the vice presidency, because a lot of things may still happen there. It depends on who these people are.
Now, with all these surveys coming out with SWS, Pulse Asia, do you see this kind of trend, or is it still too early to tell? You have a group that's also doing a survey, Novo Trends. Now, how do you see this panning out throughout from now until election time?
Well, actually, there are survey outfits. There's the Rido Associates, you have the Ibon Foundation, and there are lesser known. Our own group, in fact, is a new one, Novo Trends. And we only concentrated the last two surveys, that's in October last year and March this year, on Metro Manila. First, because we don't have the resources, and Metro Manila is basically the harbinger of things to come. And we're planning to do it after the filing of candidacy. That's the most logical period to get.
And finally, sir, from your observance from the midterm elections in 2013, now, this coming elections in 2016, now, how do you see the people voting this time? Are we seeing a more mature group of voters here in the Philippines?
I would rather think so, after all the experiences in presidential elections. People would really think very hard whom to vote, particularly when they know that the all-important presidential position is at stake.
Okay, on that note, thank you very much for joining us here tonight on NewsLife. That was Mr. Ramon Casiple, the Executive Director of the Institute for Political and Electoral Reforms. Thank you, sir, for joining.